Hey there everybody on YouTube, this is Kyle Snyder once again, aka Clipton, continuing on with the top 10 most controversial calls of all time, and this time I'm going to be doing a best of the rest segment as requested by Pat's Rule 213, who has been viewing this top 10 list that I've been doing, and he requested that I mention some controversial calls that didn't quite make my top 10 list. Now, there are many controversial calls throughout the history of the NFL, many major ones, and there's really no way that I can fit all of those controversial calls on this one video. And personally, I don't want to take too much time with this video because, you fans, basically, you viewers want to see number one as soon as possible, but I'm going to mention a few of them. First of all, you have the Music City Miracle, which happened in the 1999 wildcard game between the Buffalo Bills and the Tennessee Titans. There were 16 seconds left on the clock. Buffalo was up 16-15, I believe it was. And basically, they kicked it off. The Tennessee Titans run a trick play. They basically throw the ball across the field, like they throw it like parallel to the line. I forget which line it was. I think it was the 30-yard line. But nevertheless, they throw it parallel and it goes slightly backwards. They run it in for a touchdown, and they review it to make sure it was a backwards pass and not a forward pass, because the rules state that forward passes off of kickoffs are illegal. And the replays, the overhead angle clearly shows that the ball went backwards. They uphold the original ruling on the field. Titans win. And many Bills fans still think to this day that that was a forward pass, despite what the overhead angle clearly showed. Let's see, then you got the 2003 game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was number 3 in the greatest comebacks of all time according to NFL Network, where basically the Colts managed to score 3 touchdowns within the final 5 minutes of the game to force the game to go to overtime. It's a back and forth battle in overtime. The Colts finally get in field goal position to kick it off. Mike Vanderjagt originally misses a 40-yard attempt, but there's a flag on the play, and it's on the Bucs, and you're wondering, what could the penalty be? The Bucs couldn't have held because no one was trying to get downfield. The Bucs couldn't have performed unnecessary roughness or anything, so it was kind of a mystery. And then the referee called Simeon Rice on one of the rarest penalties to be called in the NFL, leaping. That's right, leaping. That penalty has not been used in overtime before nor since that game. As for regular playing time, the last time that penalty was called was in 1938. So because of that penalty, the Colts got better field goal position. They make it the second time, and a lot of fans feel that a lot of Bucs fans feel that the penalty shouldn't have been called, because basically what the leaping rule is that if you're more than a yard behind the line of scrimmage, you cannot run up, jump to try and block the field goal and end up landing on your players. And since Simeon Rice barely grazed one of his own players, that's when he was called for leaping. And Mike Pereira said that technically it was the right call, but because it was such a close play, it's not one that they normally want to be called. Then, another call that didn't quite make my list was Ed Hockley's blown call during the Chargers versus Broncos game in 2008, which I think was the first of 2 matches that the Broncos and Chargers played in 2008. Basically, Jay Cutler, who is close to throwing a touchdown, he tries to go for a pass, but the ends up losing the ball before his arm was going forward, and when the ball hit the ground, the officials immediately blew the play dead for an incomplete pass, but it was clearly a fumble. Ed Hockley, about a minute afterwards, said it should have been ruled a fumble, but by rule they could not review it because checking to see if an incomplete pass was a fumble was not reviewable at the time. And the Broncos ended up winning the game 39-38, I believe the score was. But anyways, after that game, basically after the season, the NFL decided, yes, we can finally make sure that an incomplete pass is a fumble. Previously it was you can only check to see if a fumble was actually an incomplete pass, aka the tuck rule. But they decided to alter the rules so that now you can challenge to see if the quarterback did fumble instead of throw an incomplete pass. Let's see. Then basically the last postseason that we had, there are two things worth mentioning. One of which is the wild card game between the Green Bay Packers and the Arizona Cardinals. Game was tied 45-45. It forced an overtime. Very last play of the game, the Cardinals go on a blitz. They catch, I don't know how to word it, but basically they tackle Aaron Rodgers to the point, as he's throwing the ball, he loses the ball, and the Cardinals get it, run it in for a touchdown. And the controversy comes from during the time that Rodgers was hit, the defender was grabbing the face mask, and a lot of fans contend that should have been a face mask penalty, but there was no twisting or pulling of the face mask, so no face mask penalty was called. But still, fans feel that should have been a face mask penalty, so the Green Bay Packers ended up getting eliminated in overtime. And finally, you got the 2009 NFC Championship game between the New Orleans Saints and the Minnesota Vikings, which ended up going into overtime, and I feel that this was, there were many calls that favored the Saints in overtime. One of which was a phantom pass interference call. And the replay, after pass interference was called in overtime, they showed the replays, and the replays showed that no contact was made, no physical contact was made, so pass interference should not have been called. Then you have booth review after booth review after booth review. The first booth review, when they were showing the replays to see if it was a first down or not, the play was upheld that it was not a first down because the receiver was rolling behind the first down marker before contact was made, so therefore no first down. Then the next play, they try to go for it on fourth down. It looks like they convert for the first down. Then they do another booth review, and the replay was inconclusive, that there was no way to determine where exactly he landed. So by rule, if a replay is inconclusive, the call can't get overturned. Then there was the third booth review, which basically 2nd and 13. It was a 10-yard gain for the Saints. Then there was another booth review, and this one I thought they're finally going to overturn a call because the receiver, even though he had possession, he didn't have control, and the ball hit the ground. I thought it was going to be an incomplete pass. Surprisingly, the referee said the ruling on the field stands. It was a completed pass, and so that set up a 40-yard field goal for the Saints to go to Super Bowl 44. I wanted the Saints to win, but I really didn't want it to see it happen in a controversial overtime. That's not really the way I wanted to see the Saints make it to Super Bowl 44 against the Saints. So that's basically my best of the rest segment on my controversial calls of all time in the NFL. Be sure to stay tuned for number 1 on the top 10 controversial calls in the NFL.